we're live. Welcome to week 2.
That's how you're gonna start off with a conjunction?
Yes. You're allowed to start with a conjunction. It's a fact. You can look it up. Go ask an English teacher. You can start with a conjunction. That's an old rule.
I don't think I've heard that rule.
You're absolutely allowed to.
What? I just can't think of a scenario where it's to separate thoughts.
It is. It's more of like a long-winded thought in a paragraph that adds a little bit of suspense. Not the point. I'll look it up. You know what? We should post I'll post a link in the show notes of this show to how you're allowed to use a conjunction properly at the beginning of a sentence. Not the point. Week 1 did not disappoint. Notre Dame, national title contenders. Michigan is bad. UGA, Clemson, Bama, all cruised. Virginia Tech looked pretty good. Ed Orgeron is amazing.
Genius.
Absolute angel. But ultimately, we appreciate you being here. We're going to break down all the games this week and last week. But most importantly, thanks for showing up. Make yourself at home. Take a seat. Welcome to Recency Bias. All right, here we go. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome to week 2. And week 1 absolutely did not disappoint. Notre Dame is national title contenders. Virginia Tech is the best team in the entire country. We went 0 for 2 on our guaranteed locks of the week. Because you're under missed, right?
I underestimated South Carolina's offense.
And I dramatically overestimated Texas.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to start. It was a noon game. It was a weird game. It was a really weird game. Michigan jumped off to a huge lead. Ellinger looked terrible. I think Tom Herman kind of reminds me of like our sleazy landlord from college, and just his mannerisms on the sideline, the way he looks, the way he acts. He's like the type of guy who would sell a house without fully installing all the walls. For that reason, I'm off at the Texas.
It's a bedroom with no wall.
Correct. Yes,
so it's like a living room.
It's an extra living room. But for that reason, Texas, they don't have it. Maybe they'll pull it together this year. I still think they're talented, but Ellinger looked bad. They just didn't look good. And with the fact that Maryland could pull that off with everything that's been going on there. And it was weird too because it got to like 6 minutes in the fourth quarter, and then all of a sudden there was a 3-hour rain delay.
Yeah, so I was in the wedding during this game, so I didn't actually get to watch this game. But I followed it closely, and you were texting me throughout, and then all of a sudden, it just stopped changing, and it said delayed, and I was very confused as to what was going on. So Texas is the best team to never come back, essentially, is what we're gonna settle up on.
Texas is like...
Or is it Michigan? Is Michigan the best team that's never going to come back?
That's a good segue right there, actually. Michigan... So Michigan-Notre Dame, that was a game where I think watching LSU-Miami, the story was more, okay, Miami isn't what we thought they were, more than LSU's amazing. I think watching Michigan-Notre Dame, the story turned more to, okay, this Notre Dame team is for real.
Oh, yeah.
And granted, Michigan looked bad at times. Shea Patterson was very inconsistent. He had his cramps that he had to leave and go get an IV, and they put in Christian McCaffrey's brother, who was okay. And they kind of the score was closer than the game actually was. Notre Dame had that game won. I agree. And Michigan scored a late touchdown.
Whenever you watched it at any given moment, it felt like Notre Dame was in control. It's one of those things. If you look at the box score, it might not be as indicative of Notre Dame just had control of the football game. And if you ask Michigan people, they agree that Michigan was not. They weren't going to win that football game. About halfway through, you kind of knew.
Yeah.
And they looked good. Notre Dame looked for real.
Notre Dame looks for real. Wimbush, I don't think he looked super consistent throwing the ball. He had a couple real nice throws, but he give him his running. I mean, he sliced and diced them all on third downs, taking off, running for 15 yards effortlessly. The dude looked good. Harbaugh is kind of a dweeb. Like the way he's been doing
Mr.
it for a couple
Khakis.
seasons now. He's got his his hat that's like a little bit too flat, and like the glasses that are like right up against it with no rim on the bottom. He just looks kind of dweebish.
And his khakis. He loves his
He
khakis.
loves his khakis. The dude loves his khakis.
And milk. He loves his milk.
Loves his milk. Won't eat chicken. So that being said, let's move to Virginia Tech, Florida State.
Okay, so I'll take this one because I was giving such high praise to Willie Taggart before the college, and I stand by Willie. I do. I'm gonna say a couple things though that Willie kind of messed up. You got to at least give the referees opportunity to review that play. I don't know if you know which one I'm talking about, but it was on a pass down the middle of the field. I think it was a pass. I don't remember.
I don't know.
I don't remember the exact play, but I remember the guy rolling over the top of the defender's body into the end zone. His lineman is standing there, putting his hands up in the air, saying touchdown. He knew it. He saw it. He helped push the guy into the end zone.
Was it a touchdown?
And it was absolutely a touchdown. When they reviewed it, it's clear no part of his body ever hit the ground. He rolled over the top of the defender into the end zone and scored a touchdown, but they called him down on the one. And instead of allowing the play to kind of settle and let the refs review it or challenge it, he runs up there and hurry up, snaps the ball. He runs up there and hurry up, gets a false start, goes back to the 5-yard line, tries to do some quarterback draw, gets tackled, and they end up kicking a field goal. And that was the only points they got all night long. And that right there, that moment was kind of a disaster in the beginning of Willie Taggart's career at Florida State.
Yeah, he had another moment too towards the end of the first half. I think it was maybe 14-3 at the time, and they drove down the field. They got fourth down at like the 20-yard line. It was like
he didn't use any of his timeouts on that drive either.
Well, he went for it on fourth down instead of taking the points. It was still the first half.
Yeah.
I think you got to take the points there. And he's been a head coach before. It's not like this is his first.
3 different universities, pretty major programs. I kind of butchered that whole exchange, but Florida State fans know exactly what play I'm talking about. Like, they know that was a touchdown. If you were watching it on TV, the announcers were going nuts saying, this is a touchdown, you need to review this play. And then they got the false start penalty, and it kind of killed I'm pretty sure, I don't know the weird squirrely rules, but I'm pretty sure if you run up and then you get a false start, that counts as the initiation of the second play, so you can't review after that false start penalty. I'm not sure
on that, yeah. But I'm calling my shot. I think if by midway through next season, Florida State's not a national title contender, Florida State fans are going to be using #FreeWillie, and they're going to be trying to get rid of Willie Taggart.
You're starting the Free Willie hashtag.
That's going to be the hashtag.
So I do want to talk a little bit about the actual game, but I believe in Willie Taggart. I don't know if Florida State's going to give him enough time, because if you look at what he's done at his other programs, it took about 2.5 seasons before you saw results. And in this culture and in this the environment you have in college football right now, quite frankly, you don't get 2.5 years. You get one bad year in your first year, and really that can't even be that bad. You're talking about, like, at Florida State, you need like 7 or 8 wins in your first year, and then like you got to be playing football in meaningful games and being in them to literally to win. Because if you're not I'm not going to say he has to be a national title contender, but they better be an ACC. They better be out of that half, because Clemson's not in that. Is Clemson in that half?
Yeah, they got Clemson.
Are they in the same half as Clemson? Yeah. Okay, excuse me. I thought it's Miami that's in the other half. They need to be competing for that ACC title game next year.
Another one I want to talk about is how App State just absolutely blew it against Penn State.
So I go ahead.
They started off, it was close at halftime. They had a lead, and everyone's like, ooh, like this could happen. But really, we didn't believe it was going to happen. And then before we knew it, Penn State had a 2-touchdown lead in the third quarter, and it was over. Then we all got the score alerts on the bottom of our TV. Like, oh, shoot, App State cut it to 1. And we flipped to it to see what's going on. And all of a sudden, they recover an onside kick. They come down and score. They get a stop. They get the ball back, tied up with 2 minutes to go. We're like, oh, shoot, like this is going to happen. They come down the field, and, as a player and as a coach, you can't not score a touchdown. But if App State doesn't score a touchdown and they just get tackled and they're inside the 10 and they run another minute off the clock and they kick a field goal, they win that game. They absolutely win that game. But they scored. Penn State got the ball. They drove down the field effortlessly and scored. And then App State got it back.
They had a return that brought them to the 50.
Yeah, that was a crazy return too. The little stutter step in the end zone where he pretended like he wasn't gonna return, and he was very close to getting tackled at like the 15, which would have been a disaster for Penn State. But no, App State absolutely blew that game, and it should be Penn State should be 0-1 right now with a loss to App State.
They should be treated as if they're 0-1 right now, because what's going to really infuriate me is if Penn State just turns this whole thing around. And because if you lose that game to App State in game 1, you're done. Your playoff chances are over for the whole year. I don't care what you do after that point. In my opinion, if I had a vote, it's over in game 1. And now the fact that they scraped away because App State kind of blew it, they're going to have the opportunity to run out of the Big Ten, which I don't think they will, because I think Ohio State looks phenomenal. And, well, I was going to say Michigan, but that's not the point. The point is they should be evaluated by that game. They should be, and I don't think they will be about three-quarters of the way through the year.
I agree with you. I think their margin for error, even though it's a win, I think, although I will say, like, maybe there was a problem getting hyped up for the game, because when the game was on the line, they came down and effortlessly scored a touchdown. And, like, it's hard to say. Like, sometimes teams come out flat, but I agree with you. It's definitely a troubling sign if you're a Penn State fan that, you really are lucky to escape App State with a win.
Yeah. I just hate that, but we can move on.
I want to go just real quick. We don't have to touch on the game itself. Ole Miss against Texas Tech. Ole Miss looked great. Justin,
you talking about the blue unis?
Jordan Te Amo. I think that means I love you in Spanish.
It does. Nice.
Yeah, the multicultural here.
Yeah.
Te Amo.
Diversity.
He looked incredible. He was a very good looking quarterback by his play.
Would you say Te
by
Amo?
his play? But no, I wouldn't be surprised if I'm not delusional. Ole Miss isn't going to win the West, but I wouldn't be surprised to see them make some noise with an upset. Either maybe Alabama. They always seem to give Alabama some trouble. Maybe LSU. Maybe Auburn. They got South Carolina, Texas A&M. They're going to beat at least one of those teams that they really have no business beating. And I just wanted to give a shout out to Ole Miss, looking good.
What games did we not cover? There's got to be at least.
We didn't get to Washington, Auburn. We didn't get to Alabama,
okay.
Louisville.
All right, we'll do Washington, Auburn. So everybody is like, Auburn looks great. I could not disagree more. Maybe it's just because I'm a Georgia fan and I hate Auburn, but their offense looked dreadful. They had 100 yards of penalties before the fourth quarter. Their defense looked good. Their kicker is awful.
So Auburn came out, and I think I have a new theory about Auburn. I think Auburn comes out, and they're just like way too amped up, way too excited, and they run out of energy after the first quarter. Like, they came out there, and they were
It's a very funny take.
And they were dominating. Like, the first quarter was like, how is Washington even still in this game? Like, Auburn drove down the field effortlessly. Washington, like, stopped them on third down, and they kicked a field goal and missed. And then they stopped them on third down, and they kicked a field goal and made it. It was a type of game where Auburn was dominating. Washington was lucky to stay in it. And then it just turned into, like, Jake Browning throwing long bombs. It happened like 3 times. A long bomb, pass interference on Auburn, but the Washington receivers still made the catch.
Oh, yeah. I know what player you're talking about.
Theme of the game. And then they came in, and it looked like, oh, this is going to be a good finish. And then it just kind of, I think Chris Peterson's a good coach, but I don't know what was going on in some of the play calls at the end of the game. And they really the last drive, they really blew it. Jake Browning took a sack to end it. And I will say, I think it was a great game. Both teams were evenly matched, and both teams are good teams. But some people are looking at that saying, like, yeah, Auburn is, the top team right now.
So I saw an ESPN analyst, and I can't remember what his name was, or else I'd call him out personally, picked Auburn and Alabama in his Final Four. And I'm like, what delusional universe do you live in where you can see that shaking out? Where you can see Auburn and Alabama playing in the last game of the season, and then
right. I mean,
and he had Alabama as his number 1 seed, so it's different than last year. And it was Alabama number 1, somebody at 2, Auburn at 3, and somebody at 4. And so in my mind, I'm like, how in the hell does that work out?
That's the only way it works. Is both teams are undefeated. Alabama beats Auburn. Alabama wins the SEC championship. Auburn has one loss to Alabama. I saw another scenario.
That's not going to happen.
It's not going
I'm
to happen.
sorry.
I saw another
that
scenario
is delusional.
where that same regular season, same thing happens. Bama goes undefeated. Auburn's only loss is to Bama. Georgia's only loss is to Auburn, and then Georgia beats Bama in the SEC championship, and then all three of those teams get in. That would be wild. But that's not going to happen either.
That's insane.
Actually, if that happens, I'll get a tattoo.
Of the playoff bracket?
Yeah, of the playoff bracket. On my
it has to be
butt
at
cheek.
least as big as a deck of cards.
All three teams have to make it. I'm on my
on
voice.
the record saying you'll get a
Yeah.
tattoo.
I hope I don't regret that.
That'd be pretty amazing, though.
Uh,
Just put recency bias right underneath it.
I'm already regretting it. All right, let's talk.
want-
Talk Tennessee. The SEC went 13-1.
Don't make me talk Tennessee.
In the first week.
We went
Great
what?
start for the SEC. The only loss,
We went 13-1.
everyone except Tennessee.
Rocky Top, baby.
People are very high on West Virginia, and I think there's no reason not to be. I think they're a real contender this year.
Will Greer can deal it.
But I think it's more so Tennessee just sucks. Tennessee sucks. They look terrible. That was ridiculous. And you know what? Oklahoma's winning the Big 12. Like you can pretend like, oh, West Virginia looks. Oklahoma's winning the Big 12.
Kyler Murray can play.
Kyler Murray is Baker Mayfield 2.0. I will say some of the highlights they're showing of him. He broke a bunch of tackles, juked everybody out, and then ran for like 7 yards. Like that was a 7-yard gain. He broke like 15 tackles, ran like 50 yards. That was still a 7-yard gain. But the dude looked incredible. I mean, Oklahoma has so much talent. Rodney Anderson.
And there's not a whole lot of competition coming out of the Big 12 right now.
Especially
I mean,
Texas is in competition.
Oklahoma State can play, but they have no Mason Rudolph, right?
Yep. Mike Gundy shaved the mullet.
And that's just dreadful.
So they're kind of, in my mind, they're just dead. It's Oklahoma, and they just have to come out of there. Maybe TCU.
Would you say Oklahoma has the easiest road to the playoff of a team you could see being in the playoff right now? After week 1, because before week 1, I probably would have said Washington.
You know what? I still think, and I'm with you. Washington, I think, has an easier path, but Washington now cannot lose another game.
True. Fact.
Whereas Oklahoma has a slightly tougher path, but if they lose one game, they're still okay. Washington can't lose again.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think probably so.
I can't really think of an easier path. So yeah, I'd probably say. Oh no! Back it up. Clemson.
Yeah, you're right.
Clemson
For
sure.
They can lose a game and
then
Florida State and Miami
win the weakest.
both aren't real. They have Virginia Tech. They're at A&M this week. Which do you want to start talking about this week's game?
Sure, we can start. I think did we hit
shout
them
out
all?
Tua? That's all we need to say.
We didn't really thoroughly hit LSU Miami.
Shout out Tua. Shout out.
I know. I underestimated.
Kojo.
Yeah, we can just give small shout outs.
No, the only thing to say that I want to say, I think LSU, we mentioned last week that we would learn a lot about LSU from this game. I don't think we learned that much about LSU. I think we learned that I think we learned more about Miami than we learned about LSU.
That's true.
There's potential that if LSU comes out and beats Auburn and then beats Georgia, we learn more about LSU. I mean, there's so much still that they need to do before we can make any kind of generalizations about LSU. But I will say they have a quarterback. That dude looked good.
Yeah, Burrow can play.
If Coach O's passion rubs off on the whole team,
I'll tell you, their defense can play. Their defense can absolutely play. They picked up this kicker from the middle of nowhere, from some D2 school who's
right, somewhere in Australia.
Yeah, and he can knock them straight and long, man. Let me tell you, that kid can kick.
They have probably the best name ever for a corner, Greedy Williams.
That's pretty awesome.
That's the best cornerback name, Greedy.
I think they have great corners too, just in general, despite their names.
Oh yeah, and it was weird. They have great corners, and Miami was just airing it out on them all day. They were just trying to. And Malik Rozier, terrible.
So I think for one of the first times in my life, I had a great prediction. That game kind of went exactly how I predicted. It was Miami struggled because Malik Rozier could not throw the ball, and he was too dependent on his legs. And I just don't think you can. I don't think you can depend on a quarterback that can't throw the ball against an SEC defense like that. And it was kind of slow nip and tuck at the beginning, and then LSU just kind of ran away with things. Once that running back got going, got his first touchdown for 50-plus yards, and then he nabbed a second one, it was kind of just off to the races at that point. Miami essentially had nothing to match for LSU's defense, and their offense was good enough. And their offense was pretty good. Burrow played well. We still haven't. I agree with you. The LSU Auburn game, not this week, but the one after, that's when I'm really going to learn a lot about LSU and Auburn.
What we learned about LSU is that they're not a joke. They're not what some people thought LSU would be, because they came out there ready to go. And they exposed Miami for what a lot of people like us thought Miami were. So they were good enough to do that. And again, with these teams, you're hesitant to make sweeping generalizations, even though we are heavily influenced by recency bias. We don't know if they're going to be able to be consistent and be consistently good.
And to go off of Miami, that Miami team looked a lot like Georgia teams of the past. Undisciplined defense, bad penalties, a slow-moving offense that just seemingly didn't make sense at times. I love Mark Richt, but it looked like I was watching Georgia in 2013. And that's what it felt like. It is a defense that's just getting gashed, stupid penalties. I mean, just penalties that like make no sense. You know, you're not talking about a holding penalty here and there. You're talking about just like random personal fouls. And
can the turnover chain come back from this?
No. I thought the turnover chain was kind of dumb from the beginning, but
I think it's still cool. They just need to
it's
get
a
their
very
mojo
Miami
back.
thing, but
If they get their mojo back, they'll make some noise. They'll win some games. They'll get the turnover chain back, and they'll be fine. But they're not a real contender at this point.
No. Let's move on to next week's games, because we thoroughly discussed last week, and we'll throw to a bone. The kid can play football.
That dude's good. We don't even need to really discuss that game. Like we said, again, it doesn't matter who Alabama's playing week 1. You don't want to be them, or else your season's screwed.
Yeah, it's horrible. So,
all right, this week, first let's discuss UCLA Oklahoma. Any reason to discuss it? UCLA is 0-1 with Chip Kelly.
I don't think so. Well, I don't think UCLA can come within 14 of Oklahoma when it comes to the final score. Oklahoma's defense I think it's better. It's shaping up to be better than it was last year. Their offense is just as good as it was last year. So, no, I don't think UCLA can touch them with a 10-foot pole. So, yeah, no reason to really dive down too deeply into that one. I think Oklahoma handles that game pretty easily. I don't even really think it's close after the first half. So, what do we have on the slate? We got A&M Clemson. We got Georgia, South Carolina, which I'm really excited to finally break down a Dogs game.
Kentucky,
Florida, which is actually pretty exciting, and
USC,
Stanford.
Michigan State, Arizona State. Herm Edwards.
Okay. I'll give you Herm Edwards. Let's go with whichever one is first.
Let's go Georgia, South Carolina. Let's start.
Yeah, that's at 3:30.
Something we're all familiar with. And all, I mean you and I.
Yeah. I'll start. I think South Carolina, I've been saying this from the beginning, South Carolina is the third best team in the SEC. I will maintain South Carolina is the third best team in the SEC, despite the fact that Auburn and LSU looked good this past weekend. South Carolina can play. That being said, they still haven't proven enough to me to say that Georgia's even going to struggle. Georgia has I think what's going to happen is I think the road atmosphere in Columbia is one of the most underrated road places to play in the SEC and maybe in the entire country. I think Georgia will not struggle at the beginning, but I think the game is close for a little while. But I think ultimately Georgia's volume of athletes and volume of weapons is too much for South Carolina's defense. And I think Georgia's defense is good enough to keep Jake Bentley in contain and prevent South Carolina from scoring enough points. And ultimately, Georgia will have too many. This song gives me anxiety from back in like the Marshawn Lattimore days. But I really can't.
Keep going.
Ultimately, I think Georgia is too athletic and too versatile across the field, and Georgia takes away the victory, maybe by only like 10 points. But I think Georgia will get the win. I think it is the game that decides the SEC, at least the SEC East.
Yeah, sorry.
Is that supposed to hint that you're like picking South Carolina?
No,
or
I'm not
something?
picking South Carolina. So South Carolina, I was just talking about their hype. They are hyped up for this. This is the first time they've had a reason to be excited in several years, and they're excited. And it's going to be a hostile atmosphere. Muschamp's going to be, this is been on his calendar for a while. He's very hyped up for this, very excited. While I think South Carolina is really good, they just simply don't have the same kind of athletes that Georgia has. And the one thing I will say, though, if they can keep it close for 3 quarters, then they can win this game. But Georgia really needs to put their foot on the gas and make sure that doesn't happen, and there's no reason Georgia shouldn't win by 2 touchdowns.
I agree. What I hope is that Georgia can find a way to take the crowd out of the game early. And that's asking a lot because the crowd in Columbia is really, I mean, I've never been, but everybody who tells me it's just rowdy. And that song. God, I lost my train of thought.
Sorry about that. All right, let's move to Clemson, Texas A&M.
Okay. I still think Starkville should be starting, but go ahead.
No, I think actually, I didn't write down the dude's name, but he looked really good, Texas A&M's quarterback. And I was, I guess, surprised that Starkville was not named the starter, considering how he ended last year. But no, Texas A&M looked good. And again, I think you can't, in your right state of mind, pick Texas A&M to win this game. But in the same thing as the Georgia game, they're hyped up. Their fans are hyped up. This is the first time they've had something to be hyped up about in like 2 years or so. And they're hosting number 2 Clemson in College Station. And the same thing. If they can keep it close for a couple quarters, I don't see a reason why they can't upset Clemson.
So, couple things. Don't underestimate Jimbo Fisher. Jimbo has played Clemson every single year for the last, decade or however long he's been at Florida State. He knows Clemson. He knows that offense. He knows Dabo. I think Texas A&M can hang. I don't know if they'll win. I don't think they'll win. But they can hang in there in this football game. And I would love to see them do it. I would honestly love to see them win for a couple of reasons. I think Clemson, again, as we mentioned earlier, has the easiest road to the playoff. Clemson taking a loss here helps Georgia out. Second thing is, I would love to see A&M bring up the standard of the West even more than it already is, and bring up another team to challenge Alabama. And I think Jimbo Fisher is a quality coach who's capable of doing that. In addition, I think he knows this Clemson team, and I think he knows how to get a team ready to play and possibly beat a Clemson team. I don't think they're going to win, but I would not be shocked if I blacked out and woke up on Sunday morning and they had beaten them.
I think if you black out and wake up on Sunday morning, then you probably should get your urine tested or something.
If I black out right now and wake up on Sunday morning,
yeah, you got drugged or something.
But if Georgia goes into South Carolina and gets their ass kicked,
also if that's the first thing
anyway.
you check when you wake up on Sunday morning, you might need to reevaluate your life.
It's how often do you check your urine?
No, I'm talking. You wake up, you black out, you wake up Sunday morning, and you're immediately on your phone A&M won. All right, let's go USC Stanford. Let's go out west. People for some reason are down on Bryce Love. He had a good game, didn't have a phenomenal game. This will be his coming out party. Stanford's gonna crush USC. Bryce Love's gonna run for 185 yards. By crush, I mean 35-21.
So, at some point on this show, I want to do a segment on, even if it's just a monologue for a few minutes, about a gripe, not being a Stanford fan, but let's just say for the sake of argument I am. Stanford players getting axed from the Heisman, and I think largely because they're on the West Coast, Bryce Love being one of them.
they always. That's one thing. If you're a running back and you want to finish second in the Heisman, go to Stanford.
Go to Stanford. Or if you're Andrew Luck and you want to finish second twice, not the point. I think that this game, Bryce Love, if he wants to win the Heisman Trophy, he's got to show up. He's got to have 185 and 2 touchdowns because you don't get many opportunities at Stanford to be watched by the people who are asleep on the East Coast.
Yeah,
People are going to stay up and watch this game, but they might not stay up and watch you play at Oregon State.
They got Washington.
They got Washington. We'll stay up and watch that one. But you've got to make a name for yourself in these bigger games because if you don't, the numbers are not going to jump off the page. People have to watch you have those Heisman moments, and they have to watch you live. And I still maintain it that West Coast players don't have as good a chance at winning the Heisman. And there's evidence to show that. Don't bring up Marcus Mariota. I think Bryce Love goes off in this game, and I think Stanford wins, even though I think USC is the better team. I think Stanford takes it home. Where is that game being played?
At Stanford.
Even more reason. What's the line?
I don't have that up right now.
Okay. You're supposed to have that. Come on. Stanford, taking Stanford by 8 points. Weird call.
Stanford -5. I'm taking Stanford -5.
Yep. Yeah, I think Stanford can do it.
All right, and lastly, the last game of interest for me, Michigan State at Arizona State.
Wait, what about Kentucky, Florida?
Oh, Kentucky, Florida. Florida's gonna win.
Kentucky's going to do it this year.
They're not gonna. Florida's gonna win.
Okay, fine.
All
right.
It's at Florida.
So if you remember, we had 2 lock gambling picks last week. Lock bets against the spread or whatever. Max's was not against the spread, but so Max and I are now 0-2 in our locks of the week. We should keep it going. All right, I got mine. 100% lock, you can guarantee it. My rule of thumb with Vegas, if you ever see somebody with more than 32 points, take them. I'm taking New Mexico plus 35 to beat Wisconsin. Wisconsin is absolutely not going to beat New Mexico by, 36 points? Or let's just say 35 points.
You don't think they're even going to score that much? You know, the way...
I think it's possible that they win this game like 32-0.
I agree. I think, and that was my thought process with South Carolina last week, so I'm hesitant to fall into the same trap. But the way that Wisconsin's offense is, they just run the ball. Like, even if they score on every possession and stop whoever they play, who'd you say, Western Michigan?
New Mexico.
New Mexico, 3 and out every single time.
It's funny you mentioned that, though. I really like Western Michigan plus 23.5 over Michigan.
I'm doing the opposite of you. I think anytime you have Alabama against, a non-SEC opponent with an under 40-point spread, you take them. I'm doing Alabama -36.5 against Arkansas State.
Okay. Yeah, I would say that Alabama is the one caveat to that. Personally, that's my second rule of thumb. Never bet against Bama. You can live and die by that one, but usually Bama is going to hold their own and beating those spreads. But yeah, those are our locks of the week. Take what you want, but I wouldn't necessarily put money on it. But we're 0-2. We're going to have a bounce back week this week. I can really feel it. Wisconsin not going to get it done. Yeah, we're going to get back to 500. We'll get back to even or at least like -$8. But we appreciate you being here as always, and we'll see you guys next week, and we'll break it all down for you.